The 1947 District Assembly was held in the New Philadelphia Methodist Church because our church was too small. O.L. Benedum was superintendent, and Hugh Benner was general superintendent. At the time, Reverend J.D. Poole was the pastor of New Philadelphia First Church of the Nazarene. New Philadelphia First Church of the Nazarene has had 3 locations: 7th Street, 2nd Street, and our present location of 233 Fair Avenue. The present church was built by its membership, and there are current members still attending who were a part of that project. They are Norman and Barbara Thurman, Lloyd and Ann Swinderman, Dick Swinderman, Ruth Arrington, Bill Arrington, Ruby Swihart, Sue Swihart May, and Linda Hockenberry.
I started attending the Church of the Nazarene in June of 1938. It was at a tent meeting. My mother had invited me to go, and that was my only reason for going. I had no interest in the preaching. I didn't pay any attention to it. There were a lot of boys on the outside who wanted to see what was going on because Nazarenes were very noisy in those days. They would cry and shout and laugh and maybe walk the aisles and wave their handkerchief. So they were watching the show. I was watching them. I don't know what the preacher preached about because I didn't pay any attention to him. And when they gave the altar call, the woman beside me raised her hand, but I didn't know that. My head was bowed. The minister from Goshen walks down the aisle. He leans across the woman who had raised up her hand, and he said to me, "Would you like to go to the altar?" I was absolutely astounded. I said, "Who? Me?" And that quickly, God spoke to my heart and said, "Yes, you." I had absolutely no doubt that it was God that spoke to my heart. I climbed past the lady, went down the sawdust aisle, knelt at the altar. I knew nothing about praying. I knew nothing about being a sinner. The people joined around after a while, and they screamed and yelled and loud. You could hear them for a half a block, perhaps. And someone thought, "Well, what were you doing there?" And I knew exactly what I was doing. I was obeying God. So I have been a Nazarene ever since then, but more importantly, I have walked with God and He has walked with me.
New Philadelphia First Church of the Nazarene purchased our present lot for $1,500. We paid for it within a year and started raising funds to build the church. The total raised for all purposes was $3,000 before we began a building fund. Reverend J.D. Poole, our pastor, said we must establish a bank account as the church monies had previously been kept at the treasurer's home in a sock under the bed. Charles Marr was the church architect. The men of the church would construct the building consisting of 3 steel buildings put together in the shape of the cross. Due to financial constraints, the church decided to build with steel, which was supplied by Armco Steel. The church broke ground in April of 1951. Wednesday night prayer meetings and 2-week revivals were also the norm, as well as Sunday morning services, Sunday school, and Sunday night services.
Well, it was like 51 years ago, and I invited myself because I was working for the Council of Churches in New Philadelphia, and so I would go around to these churches at least once a year. I would get around and get acquainted. Not that anybody invited me, I just invited myself. I wanted to see what it was like. In fact, the first year I had joined the church, Reverend Roy Watson was looking for a director. And he said, "Well, you could be the director because that way you'll really get acquainted with the congregation." So I had to ask and ask and ask. And we did have at least 100 children that first year. But we teamed up with another church down the street, and so when we had the program, we had around 200 children, and the place was packed.